Oh, good evening. Welcome to the Planning Committee meeting of the 7th of October 2025. Recording's working. I'm the Councillor Alan Bow, Chairman of the committee. Please be aware that this meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and is also being recorded. Details of how the recordings are stored and how long they are retained for are available via the Council's website. As part of this Council's commitment to reducing the use of paper, councillors and officers may use electronic devices during the meeting. Emergency procedure: there are no planned tests of the emergency alarm. If the alarm does sound, everyone present must leave by the designated exit route. If the preferred route is blocked, use the nearest signed alternative route. Do not use the lift. Everyone must assemble at the designated point, which is in the central reservation in Regent Grove, in front of the police station. Members of the public and press should report to a member of the Town Hall staff who will be wearing yellow fluorescent jackets. Councillors and officers should report to the committee officer. Please do not re-enter the building until the fire officer advises it's safe to do so. And I have alongside me, not in particular order, I don't think. Is that done at the end? No. So to my left I have Planning Officers Dan Charles, Erin Weatherstone, Lucy Hammond and James Moulding. Business Manager Sandeep Sahota, Planning Enforcement Officer, is he here? Will? I was on the far end. Hi. Planning Enforcement Officer Will Holloway. On my right, the extreme right, Legal Advisor Nigel Bell, and Committee Services Officer next to me, Sophie Vale. I've checked you've all seen the update report and have a chance to go through it. Yeah. Apologies and substitutes. We have apologies from Councillor Collins. Councillor Harrison is substituting for Councillor Yarbregada, and Councillor Davidson is substituting for the Green vacancy. Are there any apologies? I think we're all covered on that. Members' declaration of interest. Anyone with a pecuniary interest will need to leave the room and will be called back in at the end of the item. Members are also reminded of the need to declare predetermination on any matter. Please, may I have a declaration of interest? Yes, Councillor Whiteman.
Not sure whether it is a declaration of interest, other than say that the Birmingham Road Costa Coffee drive-through planning application is in my district council ward.
Yeah, applications within your ward don't count. It's only if you know the people.
Sure, okay, thank you.
Site visits. Does any member wish to record if they've undertaken a visit on their own for applications on this evening's agenda? Councillor Whiteman.
I've been to the proposed Birmingham Road Costa Coffee drive-through application site.
Good evening, Chair. Yes, I've been to site visits on my own to item 5 on the agenda in Burton Green and item 6 on the agenda on the land east of Birmingham Road. Didn't speak to anybody whilst I was there.
I think Councillor Davidson.
Sorry, just to say that I'm really struggling to hear Councillor Whiteman. I don't know if it's your microphone not being closer or if we can turn the volume up.
Make sure your mic's in front of you. Thank you. Anyone else? That's covered all that. Then item 4, minutes. We now need to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 9th September 2025. In line with our procedures, all members can vote on the approval of minutes, although they may not have been there at the meeting. Can I have a proposer and seconder, please? Proposer is Councillor Luckhurst and seconder Councillor Gifford. All those in favour of approving the minutes? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Now down to business. The procedure for each application will be as follows. Each application will have a presentation from a planning officer. This is followed by registered speakers who will be invited to address the committee. I must ask that all speakers stick to their allotted time. Please can all speakers speak directly into the microphones and if necessary move the microphones closer to you and ensure there are no devices in the way of the microphone. This will enable you to be clearly heard both here and on YouTube. Following the registered speakers, the committee will then debate the application. During the debate, members, including myself, may well raise technical questions and issues to which the planning officers or advisors may need to respond, and I will normally invite them to do so. Please can I remind everyone that no officer or councillor will be permitted to address the committee without my permission. The committee will then make its decision based on the information within the report, any representation at the meeting, and the content of its debate. Once the decision is made, I'll announce it after the vote. For the benefit of visitors attending the committee, all applications will be decided in accordance with the current National Planning Policy Framework and the Council's adopted local plan policies, which set out a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Unless there are material planning considerations that indicate otherwise. Applications are considered against policies contained in local neighbourhood development plans that have been approved following a public referendum. Applications that accord with the local plan will usually be permitted. Applications must only be refused where there are valid planning reasons for doing so. This will help to avoid legal challenges against decisions and avoid unnecessary legal costs to the council and council taxpayer. Please note that I've already agreed that if needed, the meeting will adjourn at a suitable point around 2 hours into the meeting to allow for a comfort break. Finally, whilst I and all committee members fully appreciate the importance of the decisions being made this evening and that they may well generate strong feelings, I take this opportunity to remind everybody to remain calm and courteous at all times. There aren't any action points for me to update you on from the previous meeting, so we can move on to the first application, which will be item 6, W/24/1346, land east of Birmingham Road and Haywood Road Junction, Warwick.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application for the erection of a drive-through facility, including new vehicular and pedestrian accesses from Haywood Road and Birmingham Road, and all ancillary works. So this is the application site edged in red, and you can see from the site there, it's just on the corner of the junction of Birmingham Road and Haywood Road. Various things to point out. I'll just get my cursor to... There we go. So you've got obviously the site here, the extent of the site. Birmingham Road, you've got residential properties opposite here. New residential development here, and then further up this road you've got the various industrial units. The cemetery is this land here, and then you've got areas of open space and trees here, and then on this island here. You're just off the island with the A46, just off to the northwest here as well. So just an aerial view of the site, just to give a flavour of the context. So the site is roughly the area in yellow. So as you can see, you've got the heavily treed area of the cemetery here, the tree belt flanking the new residential development here, running up to, along the highway, running up to the A46 junction. And again, the area of trees here, residential development on this side of the road. And then obviously on the northern side of the road, it's very much a green corridor. So an existing site survey, all the green circles are existing trees within the site and also outside of the site boundary along the boundary line with the cemetery. So this is the proposed site layout. So you've got the coffee shop building here, new access coming off Haywood Road here, which comes in, and then obviously the circular drive-through facility around it, and then a number of parking spaces within the site, 2 disabled parking spaces and 2 EV charging points, together with significant landscaping proposals to the front boundaries, and also the removal of several trees. All of the trees on this site are covered by an area TPO, which was put on a number of years ago when the adjacent site was developed. So this is the tree constraints and removals plan. So obviously this is the existing drawing identifying all of the trees. And then this is the proposed plan, and everything with the red dotted circle is a tree to be removed. And then the trees that are coloured green are the ones to be retained. So just moving on to the landscape drawing. So obviously showing the significant trees retained along the boundary, keeping the site away from, there's currently a post and rail there as well, which is to be supplemented with hedge and tree planting. And then the majority of the site obviously set to hard standing surfaces for the drive-through areas and the parking areas. Existing access point here is retained to serve the development. New access point just on the corner of Hayward Road here. And as I mentioned previously, a new vehicular access off Hayward Road. So the building itself, it's been designed to be very low profile, basically predominantly timber clad or zinc clad, metal clad, under a flat roof with glazing. You can't see from the two-dimensional plan, but the glazing is actually curved. And then the road-facing elevation is this one here with hedgerow proposed in front of the service yard bin storage area. And then we've got some 3D renderings of the proposed unit as well, just to give a better understanding in 3 dimensions of the design of the unit. So obviously the timber cladding under the flat roof, and then predominant glazing on the internal elevation that faces the car park. So just a ground floor plan, just showing the total gross internal area of 145 square metres internally. Obviously the serving hatch, the obviously counters and everything aren't shown on here, and then just detailing the external seating area, and then obviously the plant area and bin storage here. And then just some sections through the site, just showing the levels changes. As you can see, just the way that the site just drops away in various places, so it's not fairly level, but there are some levels changes as you look across the site. And again, just some sort of more three-dimensional renderings of the landscaping. So these are artists' impressions of planting in year 1, if the development to go ahead, that would be the planting as planted. So it's looking at some semi-mature tree species on the boundary with some hedge planting as well. And then an indication of how it would potentially look after 5 years with that planting that's established. So just moving on to some site photos. The green arrow on the plan at the side will obviously indicate the rough position where the photographs are taken from. So the land itself is currently sort of set to predominantly grassland with a number of trees within the site behind a post and rail fence. The land itself, when the junction of the Birmingham Road and Hayward Road was upgraded, the actual highway itself was moved to its current location. So this area of land was sort of surplus highway land, and it's obviously been acquired over time. I'm just panning around. So this is Birmingham Road looking up Hayward Road, and then looking back towards the A46 junction to the west of the site. And then we just stood back looking along the Birmingham Road with obviously residential developments on the right-hand side. And then we stood now further down the road looking back towards the site. So the site is here obviously with the for sale board marking its location, obviously showing the existing vegetation to the west of the site and obviously on the opposite side of the carriageway. Then these are the trees on the boundary of the cemetery which are to be retained, and obviously the low wall here is the existing cemetery boundary. And then just another view of the site showing the vegetation within the site itself. As you see, the taller trees in the backdrop are the ones within the cemetery boundary. And we just stood on Hayward Road looking back towards the site, towards the Birmingham Road junction, just showing the obviously open area of the site, and then as you move towards the rear of the site, there's a larger number of trees. And then we just stood within the pedestrian access off the Birmingham Road that I pointed out earlier, and that's just within the site, looking along the old footpath, and also looking at the trees within the site boundary. And then just another view showing that boundary line with the cemetery. And then this is from within the cemetery itself, looking back towards the site. So the boundary itself is delineated by the large trees here, and you just about make out the low wall. But obviously these trees are within the cemetery boundary and are to be retained. So moving on to summary of the main points. The principal development is considered generally acceptable. Development will be acceptable in terms of drainage, ecological impacts, air quality and sustainability. The site is considered to be harmful to the character and appearance of the area, and the application does not demonstrate to the satisfaction of statutory consultees that matters relating to noise impact and the impact on highway safety have been adequately mitigated, and the proposal is therefore recommended for refusal for the following reasons, although I've actually missed one of the reasons off there. its impact on the amenity of the area, insufficient highways information, and insufficient assessment of potential noise impacts. We have actually added the impact on the loss of TPO trees as a separate reason for refusal, rather than it being rolled into the impact on the amenity of the area. So there are 4 reasons for refusal. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I have 2 speakers. First one is Councillor Kathleen Gorman, Warwick Town Council, objecting, and you have 3 minutes when you start.
Warwick Town Council objects to this application on a number of grounds. The application is contrary to policy TR1 of the local plan as a result of the applicant's failure to demonstrate that the development would not have a detrimental impact on highway safety by increasing the already heavy traffic levels in this area. The applicant has also been unable to show that the proposed development won't have a negative impact on neighbours in terms of noise. This goes against policy BE3 of the local plan, which states that new development will not be permitted that has an unacceptable adverse impact on the amenity of nearby uses and residents. Policy BE1 of the local plan requires developments to positively contribute to the character and quality of the environment through good layout and design. Additionally, policy NE4 of the local plan states that development will not be permitted that would have a detrimental impact on features which make a significant contribution to the character, history and setting of an asset, settlement or area. The proposed development would have a detrimental impact on the existing network of green spaces that defines the character of the area, particularly by the removal of the 18 trees which are under a tree preservation order. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second speaker is Councillor Paul Whiteman, District Councillor. And you have 5 minutes when you start.
Good evening, Chair, officers and committee members, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at tonight's meeting. I am attending in my capacity as one of the district councillors for the All Saints and Woodlows ward in Warwick, which obviously the proposal for this erection of a drive-through Costa coffee facility and its associated access and ancillary works relates. I do agree with the councillor's comments in terms of TR1, B3 and B1. I think there are planning reasons to reject this proposal, but the reason I came here really is because I've been approached by a number of ward residents with quite strong feelings about this particular application. So what I'm saying to the committee tonight really reflects both my own views and the views and sentiments of many ward residents who've reached out to me to voice their concerns and disquiet about the application. You'll gather that I'm opposed to the proposal, and I'm urging committee members to use their voices and their votes tonight to reject it, and here's why. Whilst the principle of development might be considered acceptable, along with various aspects such as its ecological impact, sustainability and drainage, in practice it's entirely unacceptable, and many of my ward residents would say it's actually quite upsetting. It's the wrong proposal in the wrong place. The committee can see from the presentation that the proposed location is immediately adjacent to the site of Warwick Cemetery, and in practice, if committee members have visited the site, we're talking really about a matter of metres here between the proposed drive-through and seating area and the graves of some of those who laid at rest in the cemetery, in what should be and should remain a peaceful and protected environment, I would submit. To have the quietude and calm of this area interrupted and abutted by a noisy, pollution-generated, brightly lit commercial enterprise which is potentially operating around the clock is both inappropriate and unacceptable. A ward resident's given me permission to use the following quote from her. She said, "I'm extremely concerned to learn that the site for Costa Coffee is still being considered next to the Warwick Cemetery. My daughter, who died aged 1, is buried very close to the side of the perimeter of the proposed site. I've been visiting her grave regularly for over 40 years now, enjoying the peace and quiet ambience of the cemetery, having in recent years also laid my mother, father, brothers to rest near to my daughter. The thought of vehicles queuing up nearby all day with people, children and animals shattering the peace of this very special place is extremely alarming. To even consider such a development there is so disrespectful to the buried ones and those visiting their loved ones. The committee should also note the area proposed for development at the site is home to an avenue of mature majestic trees, which is but presently an uninterrupted corridor through to Woodlows. This tree-lined area with its hedgerows and foliage provides a natural offset to the residential area on the opposite side of Hayward Road and frequented by residents who walk their dogs themselves there. And it's a balancing feature of the landscape, and its destruction through construction of a coffee shop is neither needed nor called for, and it would be extremely detrimental to the landscape, and it presently appears and is used. I would just add that Hayward Road in its current form, despite my and residents' best efforts, remains unadopted at the moment. Its condition and intended use, it seems to be a residential gateway to residential and business properties, really it's actually potentially exacerbating an already unsatisfactory situation. There is a lot of traffic going through properties, which are supposed to be a quiet residential area. There's no front gardens. The property is going through there quite quickly already. This is only going to increase the volume of that traffic. I think there's going to be an obvious noise, potential litter impact on those residents. I think the Stanks Island project has already sort of detrimentally impacted on them quite enough, and they really don't need this, which would be exacerbating. So in summary, this application, in my view, is inappropriate, it's unwanted, it's ill thought out, and will adversely impact the environment that it's proposed. And the residents who reside there, and particularly the relatives of those visiting people laid to rest in the cemetery, I ask and urge you to use your voices and votes to reject it tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Over to members. What do you think? Councillor Kennedy?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just questioning the third reason proposed for rejecting this application, insufficient highways information. Is this because the applicant was asked to provide information and has failed to do so, or they simply weren't there? And whose fault is it that there is insufficient information?
The application was submitted with a transport statement. Within the transport statement, it picked up on pre-application advice that was done with the County Highways Authority. One of the requirements that was requested at the pre-app stage was vehicle, basically a vehicle assessment of a vehicle movement assessment, so the number of vehicles. And within the transport statement, it made reference to that being submitted, but it didn't, no sort of traffic flow counts or anything were provided at that point, and obviously that was requested but wasn't forthcoming. We did receive a response from the applicants saying that there is no need for that information on the basis that the majority of traffic that would be frequenting or using the site would already be on the local highway network anyway, due to the nature of the use being a drive-through coffee shops. Obviously, people commuting into Warwick would already be on the road network anyway, so popping in to get a coffee wouldn't add additional vehicles to a substantial degree that would affect the capacity of the network. We asked the highways for comment on that one as well, and they basically said that we're not satisfied that is sufficient, and we would need to see the evidence and the data to demonstrate that, and that was not forthcoming. So hence the reason for refusal on that basis.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiteman.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I live in close proximity to the site, as I said, it's in my ward, and I've spent some time at this site, looking at the site itself and the cemetery, which is acknowledged to be in extremely close proximity to the proposed site of the drive-through. As Councillor Paul Whiteman said, we are talking a matter of metres here, and at ground level there is quite thin screening in terms of foliage separating the proposed site and the perimeter of the cemetery. In respect to the third point, that the site is considered to be harmful to the character and appearance of the area, I wanted to make the point that the Birmingham Road is a key gateway into the centre of Warwick, but it's not a commercialised gateway. And I think other than the sign promoting this site as a site for sale, there there isn't any commercial signage or features along that route until you reach Warwick Batteries, which is quite some way further up towards the town, and in itself is quite low-key and unobtrusive. So from that perspective, introducing a commercial development of this ilk would alter, to my mind, in a harmful way, the character and appearance of the area. I also wanted to refer to the point that Mr. Charles made as the site being low-key, but when we've looked at the presentation of the site, it appears that the branding and signage is anything but low-key and is standing up well above that sort of low-level hedgerow, particularly the pillar column, which is advertising the existence of the proposed drive-through. And just my final point, again, referring to something that Mr. Charles said around the traffic inflow not adding a significant number of vehicles to the capacity of the network. It might be the case that the network from Stanks Island, so coming up off the A46 in both directions down from the 4177 towards Warwick Town, wouldn't be impacted beyond the point at which people would turn off to enter the coffee shop route, but it would be the case that those vehicles who are turning off would significantly impact the capacity of that network. And that network in this particular area of road is a combination of residents' vehicles. There are several hundred houses on the opposite side of the road. There are business premises further down. And if you visit the site or spend time there, you'll very quickly notice that it's what's known as a rat run between the Birmingham Road and Wedge-Knock Lane. So people who are seeking to cut off the corner and the associated traffic lights as you head towards Warwick drive through at some speed. And just spending 3/4 of an hour at the site today, I was observing maxi lorries from the nearby depot, all sorts of trade vans and cars entering and exiting that site at speed. And when you add on to that the potential volume of vehicles who are driving through, then I think it would make a significant adverse impact to the capacity of that particular aspect of the network. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Councillor Bode. I'd like to understand the impact of the area TPO. Is this saying that there are no circumstances where somebody's got an area TPO that those trees can be removed?
Obviously, the area TPO covers quite a substantial area of land, and obviously the trees are within the site are all covered by that TPO. So if this was a standalone application, you would need an application to fell the trees under a TPO notice. And because it forms part of the planning application, there is an assessment of whether those trees could be removed as part of the planning judgment as well. And obviously the proposal, as we've mentioned, obviously there is a specific reason for refusal on the loss of TPO trees. But it's an area TPO, so obviously they are protected for their group, their large group or area value rather than individual species, but they are all covered by that area TPO.
Thank you. And also, I just want to understand the impact of the failure to have either a noise survey or a traffic survey. I take Councillor Whiteman's point about Hayworth Road being used as a rat run. It's unadopted. I don't. When I drive down, I don't actually know what the speed limit is on it. Sometimes it says 15, sometimes it says 40. It's a complete mess. Ironically, when the Stanks Island reworking was done about 6-7 years ago, I wasn't convinced it would work, but actually the remodelling of Stanks Island, that's the bit, the A46 junction just up from the site, including Hayworth Road, has worked very well, and it's very rare that there is a traffic jam there. So I would imagine that it could cope with the additional traffic, but the failure of the applicant to either provide a noise survey or a traffic a proper traffic model, is that of significant weight? And without that, the amenity issue would not be an issue.
In terms of the amenity, we did have a noise assessment was submitted. Our environmental health colleagues did look at that one, and the noise assessment that was submitted explored noise from fixed plant equipment, noise from the drive-through activity and car parking. What it didn't cover was the entrance and exit impact. Obviously, that's located just to the northern side here, you can see. And obviously, if you remember from the previous slides, there is a residential development just over here. Obviously, there was no assessment of the impact on the use of that access position, and also there was no information required in terms of noise from deliveries taking into account. So it was a holding objection based upon that requirement for that additional information. The requirement was asked for impact on noise from deliveries, including expected time of deliveries, so that the potential impacts could be assessed. And obviously that wasn't forthcoming. The highways information, obviously I mentioned earlier, was the traffic modelling to assess the impact on the network. So obviously without that information, the highways officer couldn't make a judgment. And obviously without that information, obviously there's the highways impact, and obviously that, if there are capacity issues, that could then have an impact on amenity as well. Obviously, they're split out into sort of noise impact on amenity and the highways impact just on the basis of the lack of modelling. So two separate reasons, but they are the highway sort of does to a degree overlap with that, obviously in terms of deliveries, etc.
So in your opinion, we should be giving significant weight to those two factors?
Yes.
Councillor Margrave.
Thank you. My questions follow on from that, really. It seems a real shame that the applicant hasn't done those two reports. We could be having quite a reasonable discussion about it, and if those two things have been decided or we had a report on it, but we haven't. And also, I think there's the 5-storey hotel with 122 bedrooms up the road, so that's quite a major building next to the cemetery, so I think this is relatively small compared to that. That was granted permission. The Warwick Town Council didn't object. So I think it's all down to the lack of information. It's a shame that the developer hasn't done those reports and come to speak.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you. One of the points listed under supporting comments says that this area is underdeveloped for social interaction, and I'm not sure how a drive-through will support social interactions, because to me it just promotes cars coming through, people taking detours to use this facility during their drives. Because when I look for a coffee shop, I don't think, oh, I'm going to go to the Costa drive-through and walk there. So I don't think it promotes a welcoming place for pedestrians on foot. And I have to echo the objections that there is no need for the facility in the area, as it will not benefit the local residents. And I think the location just doesn't make sense. And I hear what you're saying, Councillor, about the hotel being there. And if you look on the map and you look at the area, there are industrial units around here. There is a main road, yes. But why is it that we're going to put the coffee shop is it really echoey, or is that just for me? It is, okay. Why is it that we're going to put the coffee shop, right in the middle of all the houses, as opposed to somewhere, next to one of the more industrial areas? It just doesn't make sense as a location to me. And on the comments of support, it also says that the site is derelict, which again doesn't make sense to me, because it's currently a walk-through route for local residents with green space and trees, and those trees are protected. So I have to strongly disagree with that statement. And I think it is insensitive to the cemetery. And I have to agree with the officer's report that I think there are too many legitimate planning reasons to refuse this application. And I'm happy to propose accepting the officer's recommendation to refuse this proposal.
I have a number of speakers, but I will take a proposal that's been proposed. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Phillips. I'll carry on. I've got 4 people identified. So we'll take those to see how we can go to a vote. Councillor Harris.
Yes, just very quickly. Just regarding when I was looking at the effect on the green corridor, which seems to be a main point of the report. I understand the points that have been raised. very valid. But I was just thinking, to what extent, when the planning officers look at this and make that assessment, is the effect on the how, I suppose, how jarring it is around the green area that there is that taken sort of immediately after the completion of the work, the development? But because I noticed your slides on the 5 years down the line, if they're going to do some landscaping around the side, some new trees planting in, 5 years down the line, it looks a lot more sympathetic for the area around it, especially with the timber cladding and that sort of thing. So I feel as if 5 years down the line, it doesn't stand out as much, and therefore, when you're making that assessment, what is that based on? Because it's quite a key point, this policy NE4, about the effect on the look, the character, and the effect on the continuous green corridor. Thanks.
Yeah, obviously we've got the visuals. So a lot of work has been done by the applicants in terms of the landscaping. I'll try and skip to the photos that you mentioned. I say no, too far. There we go. So yeah, the application itself has been submitted with those details. We've had a landscape assessment done by the applicant's landscape architect, and obviously it's using semi-mature planting from day one, really. So obviously you've got the trees there as well. With 5 years, obviously 5 years time when it's grown up and established, obviously the summertime, where the trees are in full leaf, yes, there will be a lesser impact in terms of visually because of the trees. In terms of everything else, trees and hedgerows have a finite lifespan, and obviously tree protection conditions and replacement planting conditions can only control so much, and it's normally any planting that dies or fails within the first 5 years needs to be replaced after that 5 years. We are limited as to the control that we have over that. Obviously, the officer's assessment that we've made is it's the green corridor. It's very much open, with free from development, and the proposal obviously with the coffee shop and the associated use. So that's obviously the vehicle parking, vehicle movements, noise, lighting, obviously totem signs and everything else that goes along with a commercial use is considered to have that impact, regardless of the planting. Obviously, if you have to screen it to make it acceptable, you have to question, is that acceptable?
Councillor Lucker.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to make a proposal as well, but Councillor Davidson did that before me. And this is clearly not popular. I believe we only have it because it has 6 supporting comments. None are from Warwick, and only one is even from Warwick District at all. And we clearly have solid grounds for refusal, so hence why I was going to propose, but it's been done. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Whiteman.
Thank you. So partially echoing points that other committee members have made, just say that I think this is a reiteration of a previously mooted proposal. I'm not sure it came to planning committee before, maybe it didn't, I wasn't on it, but I think it's disappointing that having a second bite at the cherry or the donut or whatever analogy is appropriate for a coffee shop, that the applicant hasn't presented with a full and comprehensive suite of information that stands up to our rigour and scrutiny. Similarly to Councillor Davison and Councillor Luckhurst, I was also going to make a proposal to reject the application on the basis that I can't see past the third point, which is that the site is considered to be harmful to the character and appearance of the area on the basis that it would have a detrimental impact on the existing network of green spaces that define the character of the area, and it would also have a detrimental effect on features which make a significant contribution to the character, history and setting of the area. So, yeah, those are my final points. Thank you.
Thank you. My final speaker is Councillor Phillips, unless he's just going to second.
I was, in fact, going to propose that we reject it, so I am very happy to second Councillor Davidson. While I have a certain sympathy with the lack of facilities, having worked at Volvo, in the Volvo building up at the other end of Hayward Lane and the Budbrook Industrial Estate, I think, given Mr. Child's comments, that we should pay significant weight to the lack of reports, the impact of amenity, and the impact on the trees. I'm very happy to second Councillor Davison.
Okay, thank you. That's all speakers I've got. I'm not calling anyone else. We move to a vote. The recommendation is to refuse. All those in favour of the recommendation to refuse, please show. That's unanimous. That's 10-0. That is refused in line with the officer's recommendations. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 5, which is W/24/0454, Meadowview, 8 Hob Lane, Burton Green.
Thank you, Chairman. This application proposes the demolition of the existing dwelling house known as Meadowview and the erection of 4 detached dwellings and associated works. The application has been triggered to be considered at Planning Committee due to the number of objections received, including an objection from the Parish Council. This slide shows the application site outlined in red. The site comprises of the existing house, garden and vehicular access which connects to the west to Hob Lane, just here. The access also serves...
Just to interrupt for a moment, can you put the microphone in front of you?
Shall I bring it
Not
closer?
picking up.
Sorry. The access also serves an equestrian livery business located to the east of the site in the blue line area shown just here. The plan to the right of the slide shows a council's policies map with the approximate location of the site shown by the red arrow just here. The site lies within the village envelope for Burton Green, which is identified as a growth village within the local plan. The site lies outside of the West Midlands Green Belt, which is shown in green on the policies map. To the west of the site, across Hob Lane, lies a district border with Solihull Borough Council, which is shown by the solid black line just here. This slide shows an aerial image of the application site with the approximate location of the site outlined in red. This was taken looking in a northeastern direction, and the site is just here. Hob Lane is visible to the west of the site, just here, and you've got surrounding open land you can see to the south, west, south and southeast. This slide shows a further aerial image of the application site with the approximate location outlined in red again just here, but from a different view. This was taken with a southwestern direction, looking across towards the site. Hob Lane is visible just to the right-hand side here of the application site, with residential development visible off of Hob Lane and the school visible further to the north, just here. This slide shows the floor plans and elevations of the existing dwelling house. Meadowview is a bungalow with single-storey flat roof wings. There are several outbuildings on the application site, including 2 small sheds and a glass house, and the glass house is also visible on the elevation drawings just here. This slide shows a proposed site plan. The proposal seeks to use existing vehicular access from Hob Lane, and this will be retained along the northern part of the application site, continuing to serve the livery business as existing. The proposal has been reduced from 5 to 4 detached dwellings during the course of the application. These will be 2-storey in height and comprise of 4-bedroom dwellings. To facilitate the development, areas of vegetation are proposed to be removed. This is predominantly along the northern, eastern and southwestern parts of the site. A new bin store is proposed close to the access point on the entrance to the application site, but there will also be bin storage on site on plot for each dwelling. The closest neighbouring dwellings are visible on this plan, including Gable End, located just here, Oakcroft, which is adjacent to the vehicular access, Tudor Lodge and the Dormers to the north. This slide shows proposed floor plans and elevations for Plot 1. The dwellings are all proposed to be finished in brick under tile roofs. Plot 1 is simple in design with a front and rear gable and porch detailing. This slide shows Plot 2, which is similar in design and arrangement to Plot 1. This slide shows the floor plans and elevations for Plot 3. This dwelling has a main gable on the front elevation and porch detail. And this slide shows Plot 4 elevations and floor plans. Plot 4 is simple in design with a pitch roof garage projection to the front of the property, which you can see just here. This slide shows photographs taken from Hob Lane. The top left image was taken looking in a south location along Hob Lane, and the arrow shows the approximate vehicular access for the site, which you can see just here. The top right image was taken beyond the application site in a northerly direction from Hob Lane. Hob Lane is served by a footway on one side, which you can see just here. Across the road, there's an existing ditch and vegetation, which encloses fields. The bottom left photograph was taken looking in a southerly direction towards the application access, which you can see by the red arrow. And the final photograph on this slide was taken looking in an easterly direction along the vehicular access of the application site. You can see Oakcroft just here on the right, and to the left-hand side, Tudor Lodge, the neighbouring properties that line the access road. This slide shows photographs taken along the vehicular access to the application site. The plan to the bottom left of this slide shows the approximate locations of where these images were taken. The top left image was taken on the approach towards Meadow View. You can see the access to Meadow View, the driveway at the end of the close bordered fence. The top right image was taken further along the application access road, looking towards the drive and Meadow View you can see in the background. The bottom left was taken just beyond the hedge of the top right image, looking towards the livery business. And the final photograph on this slide was looking back towards Hob Lane. You can see the neighbouring property just here to the left of the image. This slide shows photographs of the house and garden. The top left image was taken looking eastward across the front elevation of Meadow View. You can see just here the existing hedge. The top right was taken looking in an easterly direction. You see the existing glass house just here beyond the dwelling house and the vegetation along the boundary. The bottom left was taken in a southerly direction towards the open countryside beyond. And then the bottom right was just panning around to the southwestern part of the site. Just moving up, looking towards the western boundary, you can see the two outbuildings in the top left image, panning around the garden area. The top right is a closer photograph of one of the outbuildings. The bottom left photograph was taken looking across the rear elevation of Meadow View. You can see the outbuilding, the dwelling house and the glass house. And the final image was a glass house on the application site. So a summary of the main points. When considering the site within the tilted balance test, the site is considered to be located in a sustainable location and represent an effective use of land. The principle of the development is supported by policy H1. The proposal will introduce benefits in the form of creation of a net increase of 3 dwellings in a sustainable location within the garden of an existing property. Subject to conditions and notes in a legal agreement, officers consider that proposal will not give rise to any adverse impacts in relation to heritage matters, residential amenity, highways matters, parking, ecology, biodiversity, flood risk or climate change. The proposal is considered to introduce limited harm having regard to policies BU1, NE4, BD2 and BG7. When considering the scheme as a whole within the tilted balance, officers considered the proposal represent a sustainable form of development and no adverse impacts will significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits identified. It is therefore recommended that planning permission be granted. There are a number of updates to this application which have been circulated on the update sheet. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, members will have had photographs emailed to them of alternative views of the site and also a presentation that was going to be presented but came in too late, which I hope you all looked at. We have a speaker, Mr. Paul Newsome, objector, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Before we start the clock running today, I'd like to apologise on behalf of Burton Green Parish Councillor Archie Taylor, who can't speak today as a result of a diary mix-up. He hopes that you've all had a chance to read his passionate late written submission representing the broader views of the Parish Council and especially the devastating impact that this development will have on the neighbouring equestrian business, which will be forced to close if this application is approved. So, on to my submission. My name is Paul Newsome. I live at Oakcroft, Hob Lane. I also speak on behalf of next door neighbours Danielle and Jonathan White at Tudor Lodge. Both properties, as you've seen, lie either side of this site access road and border the development. The planning officer believes that this proposal is a sustainable development having regard to economic, social and environmental objectives. I believe this application fails that standard. Firstly, as this development will not be connected to mains drainage, a critical aspect of environmental sustainability must be the management of flood risk, sewage treatment and the disposal of treated foul water. The application fails this test on 2 grounds. Firstly, slide 1 here shows that the proposed watercourse for the discharge of the surface and treated foul water is completely unsuitable. Secondly, objections raised by Warwickshire County Council Flood Risk Management 3 times between July 24 and April this year have not been addressed. The planning officers consider that due to the scale of the development, it is appropriate to condition details of the foul and surface water. However, the unsuitability of the proposed discharge ditch, as you can see, the absence of any evidence of landowners' consent to discharge, an absence of any water management plan for the site, and no clarity on the property owner's responsibilities are clear grounds for the planning committee to reject this application. Secondly, all waste collection bins will have to be presented curbside in front of Oakcroft and Tudor Lodge because the laneway is too narrow for the disposal trucks to collect from the redundant bin store. Slides 2 and 3, as you can see, demonstrate that this arrangement will present an unacceptable health and safety risk to disabled wheelchair users and people with pushchairs approaching Burton Green School, which is only 90 metres away, in peak morning school runs on collection days every other week, when potentially 24 plus bins will be lined up and blocking the pavement along a 16-metre stretch. In addition, noise and vibration issues from the increased traffic along the access road for both properties have not been properly considered. On slide 4, the CCTV photograph shows how close the access road runs to the gable wall of Oakcroft. Extra traffic volumes will increase noise and vibration to unacceptable levels. However, the documents online submitted show that Environmental Health have only been consulted regarding the noise from the proposed air source heat pumps.
Can you draw your remarks to a close, please? You've had your 3 minutes.
Okay. I did ask for a bit of extra for that apology.
3 minutes is what you get, and I've actually allowed you to overrun quite a bit.
Okay. I've just literally got one paragraph. Would it be possible just to squeeze that in?
Do the one.
Okay, then, thank you. The Westwood Heath development, currently in progress in Burton Green, will provide over 400 similar properties to this development in a genuinely sustainable location, and potentially another 700 in phase 2. This development therefore provides a tiny incremental increase in housing expansion set against the considerable negative impacts the Parish Council, others and I have outlined. Thank you. Thank you for your flexibility.
Thank you. Members. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you. Having heard that, there are a number of assertions made, and I'd be interested to hear officers' comments on them, that the equestrian business neighbouring it would be forced to close. Is that something that it can be, is that correct? Can it be taken into account in considering the planning application? Also, the questions about storm and foul water drainage. I know that this is often separate from the planning system, but I'd like to know whether that has impact. Thirdly, the bins blocking the road, because I understood from watching the presentation that there was an area for bin storage that would be appropriate, but would they then be blocking the road at the end? And then the final comment about the air source heat pumps. There are a number of issues raised there, and I'd really like officers' comments on those, please.
Thank you. So just to try to go through them in order. The first question was about the impact on the equestrian business. We have gone out for full consultation. I think the concerns that have been raised about the impact of noise through the construction of the new dwellings rather than the actual use in terms of the impact on the neighbouring use, which is obviously in the blue line here within the application. So the application site's just here. There's no impact to the vehicular access. In terms of impact to the livery business, no objections been raised from environmental health, and as officers we don't think residential development would have an impact. There's currently a dwelling on the site and this will be within the residential garden of that dwelling. So officers don't consider there's any impact in terms of on the business. And in terms of noise, like I said, the construction, it's for 4 new dwellings which would be limited, and no construction management plan has been recommended from environmental health on a noise basis to this application. If I can just carry on just in terms of noise, environmental health have been consulted in relation to all aspects of the development. They've not raised a concern in relation to noise. They have put a condition on for the air source heat pumps, We've had updated comments in terms of waste. They had originally recommended a waste management condition, which officers are recommending to keep in this instance, but they haven't raised an objection. They say it's a waste management team, and they've provided comments. So from a waste perspective, we do have a new bin store within the application site. It is, if I just bring up the site plan, it is within the 30-metre dragging distance of the public highway. So officers are satisfied that there's sufficient space in the bin store, which you can see just here. If I just in this location. There is space on site as well for on-plot bin storage for additional bins. In terms of waste management, they've requested that there's sufficient space in the bin store. We've also got storage on each plot. From a highway safety perspective, there was a pre-application inquiry before the application came in, and Highways did look and didn't raise any concern about bins on the highway as a result of the development. So it'd be standard bins for this application. So each dwelling would need the relevant bins, which would be, from our perspective, blue bins, grey bins, and food caddies. And there's also the option to subscribe to the garden waste as well, which is fortnightly. So there will be circumstances which officers have considered as part of their assessment where all the bins need to be presented on the public highway, but that isn't that frequent. And just to give members an idea of the frequency, we do have an up-to-date bin collection, if I can find it. I'll just have a look through. I might be able to find that for you, but in terms of the frequency, it's only every couple of months that all the bins would need to be presented to the public highway on Hob Lane. Don't think I've got that to hand, but we have looked at that as part of our assessment in terms of bins to the highway. I think that covers most of the queries, so I'll just go back and double check.
Yeah, could I just a supplementary on that? So you are satisfied that the number of bins being presented on the highway would not cause a disturbance, bearing in mind they have to go out in the morning. This is right next to a primary school, and it's the only footpath that allows access to the primary school.
So from our consultees, Environmental Health haven't raised an objection on bin storage. Highways haven't raised an objection on highway safety. We do note there'll be a number of bins linked to this development, but officers don't consider that would merit a refusal of the application.
Thank you.
On the foul water mixing, surely they'll be feeding into septic tanks?
Yes, so in this case, they have provided a flood risk assessment. It is in flood zone 1, but in terms of the details they've provided, they have looked into surface water drainage as well. We don't tend to get this level of detail for this size of scheme, but we have done in this instance. The concerns from the Lead Local Flood Authority are more to do with permissions and making sure they've got the right consents in place. Normally, we'd get those details via planning condition. That's what we've recommended in this case. So what they proposed initially is for a attenuation tank in the central part of the access, which will connect and have a break and then go down onto Hob Lane into the existing ditch across the road. They will need to get consents to put that in place, but we have consulted, and like I said, in terms of drainage, they're also going to have foul drainage on site as well. We can secure those details by condition. In terms of management for the future and those permissions, that normally happens after the process, and we're satisfied that there's enough information that we can secure that by condition. And we've also got other options that the applicant considered. This is the most feasible one they've come forward with, and that's why they proposed it on that basis.
I'm really sorry. Can you speak a bit slower, because you're speaking faster than my hands can type at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker? Somebody indicating. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, just further on the same point that Councillor Kennedy raised about the waste management, which to me still seems a bit of an ongoing, and it was mentioned by the public speaker as well. I'm not completely satisfied that it has been considered thoroughly, and I know there was talk in the report that a waste management plan would have to be forthcoming, but I have concerns with agreeing to this in advance of understanding how I can get the bin store. I understand how that will work, but on a weekly basis, they're still going to have to bring quite large bins down the roadside on that footpath, and therefore people having to go round the bins will be on the road. There's verge alongside that, but I don't know what the ownership of that verge is. But in the absence of seeing a more practical plan for how those bins will be, you mentioned 2 monthly when all of the frequency comes together, but they'll still be taken down there, 3 dwellings on a weekly basis, and you've got the, you know, without a better plan of where they'd be remained, you know, for all day without causing obstruction. I know highways haven't raised it, but that's, to me, it's still a concern that needs to be thought through really, and a solution come up with in that respect.
Thank you. Yes, I think what you'll find is, I think it's about every 5 weeks, you'll have all the bins out, which will be 12 bins, plus the food waste. Can we look at the bin store, just see how many locations put on there? Is that a bin store where they collect the bins from?
Sorry, this is the bin store here, and I have measured in terms of all the properties having garden waste and the normal collection bins would fit into this area, on the area which is adjacent to the access. But there is space for other bins within the plot if they wish to keep them there as well.
No, I understand that. It's really adjacent to the road. You
So
could get
in terms
12
of-
bins out.
Along the road, there is a footway. It's approximately 1.2 to 1.3 metres close to the application access in depth. So it is a single footway, but when we've looked at it as a whole, we haven't raised concerns from officers in terms of, with the consultation responses, it caused an unacceptable impact on highway safety.
Thank you. Councillor Margrave.
Thank you. I'm still not clear or convinced about the bin store operation. The bin store is just for when the bins are not being collected, so is that correct?
Yes, that's where the bins
So
will be stored when they're not presented to the public highway.
They're not practically located for any of those houses, so that, I don't see that working very well. And there will be lots of bins on the day, and we've already seen that example from the resident showing some photos of it blocking the pavement. It just, I'm not convinced at all.
Councillor Gifford.
Thank you, Chair. The problems come, as far as I can see, come down to the fact that the access to the site is one that is going to be an unadopted road, quite narrow. So there's no chance of bins being collected from there because we don't normally collect from an unadopted road, and certainly not from one that's as narrow as that. So that little driveway is totally inadequate for a little sort of close of four houses. And that's also, I think, why you've got there could well be problems with the flooding and stormwater as well. I am concerned that the flooding authority has their objection, as far as I can see, still stands. And normally we would expect an objection on grounds of flooding to be almost a definite reason for refusal. But I could do with a comment on that. And indeed on the whole thing of that access, because it is very narrow.
Thank you. So in terms of the vehicular access, this is an existing access arrangement, and the Highways Authority had a pre-application inquiry, and they've looked at this and they're satisfied that it would be suitable for the scale of development proposed and the existing livery business that's through on the Blue Land beyond the application site. They've looked at the widths, they've looked at 2 vehicles passing, and as part of this application there was tracking information and highways data that was presented to the Highways Authority, and they've raised no objection on that basis, and that's in terms of the access to the site. With respect to the flooding, normally for this scale of development, the lead local flood authority is not a statutory consultee, and for a bigger scheme, we'd be asking for this information. I think because of the scale of the scheme, when we've looked at it as officers, what they're asking for at the moment is information on maintenance, where at the moment there wouldn't be a maintenance company that they've appointed to serve the dwellings. They're asking about permissions into access in the ditch, and we did ask the agent to go and ask for that information during the course of the application, and they've said it would need to go through the Section 50 permissions for onto the highways land as part of a private connection when they get to that stage. So they're not able to provide that information at this time. So we have asked for it from the applicant's agent during the course of the application. And the Lead Local Flood Authority, what they're asking for is about maintenance and permissions. And officers are satisfied we can secure that at condition stage for this scale of scheme. And if this scheme, if it's not feasible to connect in the way that they're proposing, which is the most feasible scheme that they've come up with for the drainage, particularly for surface water, they'll have to look at an alternative arrangement, and we would review that at condition stage.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just asking a question really in connection with the bin collection and the comments made about the proximity to the school. As I understand it, this development is right on the edge of the village, and that most of the children will be coming from the other side of the school. Is that correct?
So this is an aerial. The school is just here, if you can see.
Yeah.
So there's the footway comes along here, and the application site's just down here. So there are no dwellings, not substantial numbers of dwellings beyond on Hob Lane, coupled down this access over here. I don't know if the other image shows more. So looking back, that's the school just in this location. You can see the other development further up here for residential.
Thank you. When I visited actually the site, there were still vehicles parked on the road adjacent to the school because they couldn't get on the minimal car parking that is at the school. They obviously couldn't get, I assume there were staff vehicles on there. But that's quite useful to show. You can see all the houses the other side of the school. Thanks.
Anyone else? Any thoughts? Recommendation is approval. I've got all night. Councillor Gifford.
I'm not really happy with this application, but I'm also concerned that it's one that we might have difficulty in upholding a refusal at a planning appeal, given that we have a requirement to provide an awful lot more houses than the 3 extra houses that we'll get from this. But I don't like the application, but I'm concerned that we wouldn't have a strong enough reasons for refusal. Those are my thoughts. I think that's possibly why there was a silence before I spoke. Is that I think that could be common to all of us, that none of us wish to propose acceptance, but none of us can see good enough reasons for refusal. But I may be wrong on that, but that's my...
Yeah, I think it's very clear we don't have 5-year land supply, so tilted balancing comes in as what's the best thing to do? And that's where we really have our hands behind our backs. Councillor Kennedy.
I think Councillor Gifford has set out the dilemma very clearly, but therefore I would propose that we accept officer's recommendation, and particularly to ensure that the that wastewater conditions and so on are followed up very clearly. And if there is an opportunity to look at the bin collection business a bit better and to rethink that, that would also be welcome.
I have a proposal. Councillor Kirsch, you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Giffords. Yeah, I don't like it either, but he's probably right. We would struggle to uphold that, so I would not happily second that proposal from Councillor Kennedy.
So we have an unhappy proposal and an unhappy second.
Sorry, can I just confirm that Councillor Kennedy is proposing to accept the recommendation, but with like I guess a note to ensure that the wastewater conditions are followed up and about the waste. Is that to update members?
Well, I think that I assume from what officers have said that the wastewater issue is covered very clearly in conditions and have assurance on that, so that's not a problem. I'm just wondering whether anything can be said about our concerns about the bin collection particularly.
So is it possible to ask for them to come back to officers when we've granted permission, presumably, by confirming that the bin collection is going to work, or there is a suitable alternative, and we're unhappy with it where it is, which could be on a note?
I would support a note along the lines that the Chair has recommended.
You got that? Yes, so we had, assuming we give permission, we would have a note saying that we are concerned about the bin collection areas and we want that to be looked at and further investigated. They might come back with the same reason, but at least we're asking them to look at it because it does look like that's a problem. Okay. All those voting to accept the recommendations laid out. So that's 9-1 in favour of the officer's recommendation to grant with that note. Thank you. Now move on to agenda item 7, which is W/25/0 117-7 Lillington Road, Leamington Spa.
Thank you, Chair. This is the application at 7 Lillington Road. The application is for the demolition of an existing single-storey side extension, erection of a two-storey wraparound side and rear extension, erection of a single-storey rear extension, and the replacement of a front boundary wall and the replacement of windows and doors throughout. This application is before committee today because of the number of public objections received. Here's the site location plan with the site outlined in red. And here's the aerial view. As you can see, the property is a detached dwelling, forms the start of a row of detached dwellings along Lillington Road that benefit from quite generous rear gardens and separation distances to the rear. And here's the block plan with the proposed development outlined on it. This large sort of square in this corner represents the two-storey. And here is a 45-degree line just drawn on the neighbouring property to show that there's no breach over here. Existing and proposed ground floor plans, you can see on this with the carport and the garage, there's a step in this elevation. That's due to the angled boundary just to maintain that 1 metre distance setback from the boundary. And then the single-storey rear extension, which starts here for the dining area, only extends 4 metres beyond the rear of the dwelling. And then here's the first floor with the first floor rear extension shown here. Existing and proposed elevations, you can see that step on the principal elevation here, and then just on the back here, the single-storey rear extension does not exceed 3 metres in height. So it's 4 metres in depth, 3 metres in height. That's to afford it a permitted development fallback as it breaches the 45-degree line to the neighbouring property. And then the rear elevations here and the side with a conditioned obscure glazed bathroom window. And then here we've just got a street scene plan just to show the boundary. So it's a low brick wall with iron railings to reflect the character of the existing street scene. I've added on this tree plan. As previously, throughout the course of this application, several of the objections have related to issues relating to trees. So the trees in the middle here have been TPO'd during the course of this application. and there were some outbuildings proposed here that have since been removed. So the development that we're considering will only affect T2 and H1 in terms of tree removals. There's a condition that's been added to secure protections for the protected trees. Site photos, you can see the existing front boundary treatment is a relatively simple timber fence, and this is the small low-level hedge that will be removed to make way for the wall. Rear elevation with existing assorted rear extensions. The neighbouring window in question that would be breached by the 45-degree line. This tree here, this is T2 to be removed. Officers don't consider it substantial enough to warrant any sort of condition requiring replacement. And then the rear of the site, as you can see, extends quite far with the protected trees standing quite tall in the middle of the site here. To summarise, the design is considered to have a neutral impact on the conservation area. There's no objection from the conservation officer. Matching materials condition has been recommended to maintain that character. The design complies with local plan policy B1 and residential design guide in terms of set down, setback and subservience. There's no unacceptable harm to neighbours. 45-degree line breach to the northern neighbour has a permitted development fallback position, and then there's no breach to the neighbour to the south. There's also not considered to be any unacceptable overlooking with a large separation distance to properties at the rear and an obscure glazing condition on the side window. And then we've also added a condition to protect the trees as mentioned previously. So it's recommended that the application is granted.
Thank you. We have no public speakers, so it's straight into committee. Oh, where's my list?
Thank you. Can I just understand more about the 45-degree? I don't know what the bit about benefits from, oh, it's gone. Benefits from something fallback position. I don't know what that means, but on the diagram, it talks about the 45-degree line from one house, but not the other one on the other side.
Yes, sorry. So I'll just draw with the point here. So there'll be a 45-degree line coming out of the neighbouring window on the ground floor here, and the single-storey rear extension would cross that line. Typically, that would be an objection because it would impact on light and outlook from that window. In this case, the extension has been reduced in size, so it could be built under permitted development, which doesn't require planning permission. So where an extension is reduced to be within a scale that doesn't need planning, we say that there's no objection to the breach.
Okay, it's interesting. Is that a policy then? It doesn't, 45-degree doesn't matter at all if it's permitted development?
That is the sort of general practice that we do. It is essentially yes, because if it doesn't need planning permission, then it's hard for us. Like if we refused it against something that doesn't need planning, that wouldn't be, or it would be very unlikely that would be upheld. So this is the view we take on these.
Sorry, but this does need planning.
No, sorry, the element that breaches. So the single-storey rear extension, that could be built under permitted development. So it doesn't have to be under planning.
Be clearer. So basically, the government have already made their assessment with the impact-based permitted development rights that a 3-metre extension is an acceptable impact. So where someone proposes, the only reason it needs permission on that side is because it's connected to the rest of the extension. If it was on its own a 3-metre deep extension, it wouldn't need permission because the government have deemed that to be acceptable. So when the next iteration of the residential design guide is released, it will be amended to say 3 metres or more, whichever is the greatest. But yeah, so typically that's the fallback position is we could build an extension 3 metres on this boundary. Therefore, it puts us in a difficult position to refuse it, even though there's a breach of the 45-degree line.
One of the quirks of planning rules. Councillor Harris.
Just on that point, I thought it was mentioned in the report, you also took into account, though, the neighbouring property, whether that was a habitable room and where the windows were, would that come into account as well? The fact that you may not take a different view if that was a habitable room with glazing at that point and therefore could affect the light into an area. Was that relevant as well?
So it would be in so far as if it wasn't habitable, we wouldn't consider it for the 45-degree line. So in this case, it is habitable, which is why it's being considered. And then, so our consideration is that the element that causes the breach doesn't necessarily need planning permission, and therefore we won't object to it on those grounds.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could just follow up on the question about permitted development rights in connection between the property at number 9, Lillington Road. I get that they could do that put a single story there at the moment. Could they then further make that 2-story or not, or is that?
No, they wouldn't be able to do that. There's limitations in terms of the distance to boundaries and 2-story rear extensions under permitted development. In this case also, because of it's attached to the rest of the development, it would breach a few limitations and it wouldn't be possible without planning permission.
Thank you. Recommendation is to approve. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Dixon, seconded by Councillor Gifford. Okay, so move to the vote. All those in favour of agreeing with the officer's recommendations to approve? That's 10-0, so that is clearly passed unanimously. Thank you. Now come on to agenda item 8, which is W/25/0695, 249 Green Lane, Finham, Coventry.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is for 249 Green Lane in Finham, which is Coventry. The description of development proposes the erection of a 2-storey rear extension to and the change of use of what is currently a dwelling into a children's day nursery, but that part of the site is within Coventry City Council's administrative boundary. The application reference for that is on your screen. The application also proposes an area of parking to be used in association with that day nursery, and that is the part of the site which falls within Warwick District Council's administrative boundary. So the application site is split with 2 red lines as shown on your plan here. This is 249 Green Lane, which is a current dwelling for which a change of use is sought into a children's day nursery, but that is within Coventry City Council's boundary. The area of land over here is the proposed car parking area for that day nursery. This is currently part of Liso's garden nursery site, which is within Warwick District Council's administrative boundary. That's the aerial photographs, just so you can see the context of the site. We've got 249 here, the car park, which is part of the wider Liso's garden nursery, which extends to the west here. I've put this plan on just for completeness so you can see the extent of both Coventry's boundary and Warwick's boundary. So the car park proposed area is right on the boundary on 2 sides of Warwick District, whilst the rest of the site is outside of our district. I should also say that this is a cross-boundary application, so a duplicate application has been submitted to Coventry City. That has subsequently been to Coventry's Planning Committee last month and has a resolution to grant planning permission. That is also subject to the signing of a unilateral undertaking, which would be the mechanism to secure the parking which is proposed in our district and which is the subject of the application before members this evening. So this proposed site plan just shows you the full context. So 249 is over here on the opposite side of the road. We've got the access to Liso's garden nursery, which of course exists at the moment. And coming into the site here
there is already an area of hard standing, which is currently the parking area for Lisos, and part of that would be proposed for the car park, which proposes 17 spaces, and that would essentially be the drop-off and pick-up zone for children attending the day nursery across the road. I've just zoomed into the site plan here just so you can see the better detail of the specific aspect which is within our own district. So the access, as I said, which is existing into Liso's garden nursery comes in here, just splits to the right-hand side if you're coming into it from the proper direction. And that services Liso's garden nursery with their, as I say, this is an existing hard standing currently where there is parking already taking place. There is also an overflow car park in this area, which I've just highlighted on the next plan. So you've essentially got, notwithstanding the 17 spaces that would be marked out for the children's nursery, there is still sufficient space, as I've shaded green here, for the garden nursery. It's very confusing that everything is a nursery. So also just to point out here, the blue line which runs alongside the hedge boundary is a proposed pedestrian footpath. There were some concerns earlier in the application process raised with both Coventry and with Warwick that it's all well and good proposing these spaces, but how is anyone going to safely access and cross the site? So we've now got the site plan updated accordingly. This shows a pedestrian path running adjacent to that hedge boundary. There will also be a pedestrian gate put into the hedge boundary at the front, and moreover a crossing point which will be facilitating safer access across Green Lane. Obviously the crossing point itself is outside of our district, so that would be done under a section 278 agreement, which is for the highway works necessary, and that would fall within Coventry's remit. But for the purposes of this application, we are dealing with not just the parking spaces, but the footpath and the provision of a gate. So we've just got some site photographs now. This is standing in Green Lane looking at the access to Liso's. So for context, that path I just referred to would be the other side of this hedge. There's a photo in a moment that will show you where the gate will come out. This is into the access. So this is Liso's garden nursery's gate. That's the access into the garden nursery. And if we just go in through that access, you can see the extent of hard standing stretches to both the left and the right. If we just pan round to our right, this is the area where the 17 spaces are proposed for the day nursery. So over to the left, there is still sufficient area for additional parking for the garden nursery. And behind that last photo, behind where I'm standing, we've got this area over here as well for parking for the garden nursery. This is just looking back down the access to Green Lane. And if we come onto the access, this is just looking to our left. So this is further north along Green Lane. Crossing point, which is proposed, would be approximately in this location here. And that's looking to our right, and you can just see number 249, which is this property here. And then that's looking back at the access to Liso. So the pedestrian gate would be approximately in this location to facilitate access across the road. So a summary of the main points. It is a cross-boundary planning application. What we're considering within this district is the use of the car park. The change of use and the other works to the nursery are for Coventry, and as I said, that has since received a resolution to grant subject to the legal agreement for the parking area. The site at the moment is already an existing tarmac surface, which provides parking for Liso's garden nursery. This application proposes 17 spaces to be formally marked out for use in association with that day nursery, which Coventry have approved permission for. The proposals in Warwick District include the footpath and the gate. The crossing point would be for Coventry to facilitate. The highway network lies entirely within Coventry's remit, not Warwickshire County. There are no technical objections, and specifically no objections from either of the highway authorities. That's both representative of Warwickshire County and Coventry City. There are no highway safety concerns that cannot be dealt with through conditions and the Section 278 works, and those are set out within your report. The legal agreement, which in this instance would be a unilateral undertaking, will secure both the delivery and the retention of the car park for use with the day nursery. Officers don't consider there are any impacts on visual or neighbour amenity, and it's therefore recommended that permission be granted subject to that unilateral undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor.
Yes, just so it's clear in my mind, we are only really to consider the car park.
Correct.
And that's, so the concerns that people have about the nursery, or indeed the even the crossing of the highway, that is really to Coventry, not to do with us.
That is correct. I mean, obviously, with the crossing point, it's relevant insofar as that is a necessary part of the development to make the whole thing acceptable. But in practical terms, the crossing point itself would be for Coventry, which, as I said, have already put their application through committee, and it has a resolution to grant. Permission won't be issued, of course, until the unilateral undertaking has been satisfactorily completed, but there is already a resolution in place to grant.
Thank you.
Councillor Davidson.
In terms of a car park, this couldn't be a better location, I think, and we're not losing any green space, which is great. I know that the objections on this application are actually all relevant to the other application, which is in Coventry, and actually none of the objections to me seem material to the application that we are considering here. The only question I have is, when you say there will be a crossing point for pedestrians, what sort of crossing point are we talking about? And just from a curiosity point of view, what speed limit is that road that they would be crossing?
Most of that road is subject to a 20-mile-an-hour zone because there are two schools, one slightly to the north of this site, one to the south. So certainly this stretch is 20. There will be other parts which are probably 30, possibly even further north it's 40, but in the proximity of this site, I know it's 20. In terms of the details of the crossing point, I don't have that information, partly because it's not a necessary part of this application, but I do believe that Coventry have a number of conditions. I've just got a copy of their committee report here, which will either seek the details of what that crossing point will look like, but ultimately, if it's done through the Section 278 process, that's effectively a separate process that sits outside of the planning application process in any case, so that will be done in association with their Highways Authority to make sure that it's meeting all the relevant specifications and widths and everything else.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the fact that it's 20 miles an hour actually kind of makes that less vital in sort of what crossing it is anyway. So I would be happy to propose that we approve this application as set out for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So I have a proposal. Are you seconding, or I'll put you on the end of my list?
I'm happy to second. I would like to ask a question too.
Okay, so I'll put you on the end of the list. Okay. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, just on that, similar to what Councillor Davidson said, it's hard to, it's fortunate that they've got this car park arrangement so close by. And interestingly it's interesting how they've got, it's useful they've had this agreement as well with the owners, and under that section on unilateral undertaking, the only risk I can see, you mentioned change of ownership, therefore the agreement would have to be revisited. Hopefully it would be passed, the agreement would pass through, because otherwise we'd have to go back to the, planning committees, Coventry and Warwick, and we'll have to reconsider. And without that, I would just see how on earth we'd have to close the nursery down unless they came up with alternatives. So that to me is the only risk, is that change. The owners know each other and how they've come to that agreement. Other than that, to protect that, I guess you'd have to, I suppose, put it in the deeds of the owner, of the nursery to make sure that passes through. But anyway, that's just my only concern, is the risk of that going forward and how that would be mitigated, really, I guess. But in terms of the crossing point, that was another point, but the fact it's 20 mile an hour, it gives me a lot more comfort, and because it can get busy along that stretch of Green Lane at school opening and closing times. But they've got elevated, I think, a road there. It seems to be a crossing point there, and hopefully that would give sufficient comfort that for the protection and safety of the users. Thanks.
Just on your first point, to come back to the possible scenario where things should change in the future, If it offers any further comfort, I am of the understanding that Coventry have put some additional measures in place. I think one of the recommended conditions on their decision would be that should the use of this car park no longer be available, then the permitted change of use of the dwelling to a day nursery would need to revert back to a dwelling. So it just, if that offers any comfort in terms of should this no longer be available for parking, then in Coventry's view, the use of that dwelling as a day nursery is not acceptable. And I suppose the other thing just of relevance to mention is the fact that there has been a previous application in Coventry's boundary prior to this, which was refused for the same thing, so change of use to the day nursery, but without parking proposed, and so it was refused. So it is a pretty fundamental part of the bigger picture.
Thank you. Calling Mr. Bell.
Chairman, just to confirm, a Section 106 agreement, including a unilateral undertaking, we say runs with the land. So if the nursery was to change hands, the unilateral undertaking applies to the land, not the owners. So whoever bought the nursery or would the plant nursery would be subject to that unilateral undertaking.
Thank you. Now come to Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you. I just wanted to query the width of the parking bays, which is 2.5 metres. And if they are dropping off small children, you need a bit more than that in a parking bay to allow children to get in and out. Are those parking bays for parents dropping off children? And if so, how's that going to be done within a 2.5 metre width parking bay? And similarly, I'm concerned about, not quite clear where the access to the parking bays is. Is it from sort of underneath into the parking bays and then the children walk out the other side? Because what you don't want to see is people parking and then the children have to walk out where all the other cars are coming in and out. Can you just sort of explain that, please?
Yeah, so just to answer your last point first, so my understanding is that because of the way the site is laid out and the turning into it from the access, you would have to come in via this way and turn into the space like that. It wouldn't be possible to come at it from the other direction because the space goes essentially right up to the hedge. And then essentially people would be directed out this way onto the path to be able to access the gate and the crossing point onto Green Lane.
So they wouldn't have to cross the incoming traffic?
Correct.
Yeah,
yes,
good. Okay.
That's correct. With respect to the dimensions of the parking spaces, there was quite a bit of discussion about this quite early on in the application, both with Warwick and Coventry officers, planning officers and highways officers. In this instance, it's quite unusual in that the site is in Warwick district, but we're actually applying Coventry's parking standards in terms of the number of spaces required and the dimensions that those spaces have to satisfy. And the reason for that is because it is the change of use to the nursery that necessitates the car park in the first instance. So whilst the application site may be in Warwick district, the reasonable approach to take is to apply Coventry standards, because if it weren't for the day nursery, we wouldn't be assessing this car park. So that was accepted fairly early on as the approach to take in this instance. And Coventry have slightly different standards to Warwick. So the car park dimensions have been designed to satisfy Coventry's parking standards, which are 2.4 by 4.8. In this district, it would be 2.5 by 5.5. And the question was asked from both Coventry and Warwick planning officers to highways, is that sufficient given that the purpose of this is to service parents dropping off children? And the Coventry Highways officer was satisfied that the spaces in this instance are appropriate in size. There wasn't any mention of them building them bigger or making them to the same specification as an accessible space. So, I mean, what detailed conversation has gone into that, I couldn't tell you, because that's for Coventry Highways to consider. But I suppose that the bottom line is that at no point in the process has it been suggested or insisted that the spaces need to be bigger because they're for children drop-off purposes, which is why we've agreed that the spaces are sufficient as shown on that plan.
I have to say I find that slightly bizarre because increasingly, wherever you see car parking spaces, there are spaces for disabled people and for parents and children, like at supermarkets. But clearly that doesn't apply here. Or maybe people in Coventry have smaller cars than they do in Warwick District. I don't know. Because that's the other thing, that cars are being supersized and taking up more and more space. I guess we can't do anything about that, but it does seem slightly strange.
There is also, actually, it might be helpful just to mention that for the Coventry application, so in terms of the change of use to the children's nursery, there are, I believe, some measures about staggering drop-off and pick-up times. So whether that's part of the reason and the rationale as to why the Coventry Highways officer was satisfied, actually these size spaces are sufficient, it could be because that's working in parallel with whatever the proposal is to stagger the times at which children are dropped off, so they never have more than X number of children arriving at any one time. The day nursery will also only have a maximum of 20 children in attendance. So 17 spaces for a drop-off zone for 20 children seems probably more than sufficient in terms of a drop-off zone. And as I say, in conjunction with whatever their staggering management proposal is, that may be why they're satisfied with those dimensions.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just say, it's a long time since I've been involved with nurseries, but they weren't like schools where you have to be there a certain time, and it's all just spread over about an hour at the beginning of the day. So I would say all they've done is fill up the space with the number of space they could get in that space. Councillor Margaret.
Thank you. I guess it is a drop-off, so they're not parked there all day. Are they actually painting the lines, or is it just for show?
That is a requirement to physically mark out the spaces. So it's a condition on the Coventry permission, and I believe we have replicated that on the Warwick permission. Yes, so condition number 4, the development shall not be occupied until the car parking spaces have been demarked within the car park, showing the minimum space dimensions as shown on the drawing. So it is there with the purpose being that those lines have to be physically marked out on the site.
We're just about to move to a vote. Is this essential? No. Case, I have proposal by Councillor Davison, seconded by Councillor Gundy, to approve the recommendation as part of the report. All those in favour? Can I just say, Councillor Whiteman, you can't vote because you're out of the room when we started. You slipped out and I hadn't spotted you. Okay, so that's 9. 0? No one against? No, 9-0, that's passed. Thank you. Don't all dash off because we've got something else somewhere. Sorry? 2 more items. When I can find them. The appeals report, first of all, agenda item 9, the appeals report, and agenda item 10 will be an urgent item and I'm allowed to come on because we've missed it, enforcement report. I thought we'd add it on as an emergency measure because people want to know what's happening on enforcement. So we start off with the appeals report. Any comments on appeals? Kennedy.
Can I just have a bit of understanding? This, the planning application 240711 didn't come to us at committee, is that correct? That was appeal against non-determination.
Yeah, that's correct.
I think it would be helpful for us just to sort of understand this because it seems quite complicated and why was it not determined?
It's quite fortunate that I'm here because that was my application. It is fairly complicated. So in a nutshell, the application went to appeal against non-determination because it was validated in May last year. In July last year, there were a number of technical objections and a number of additional reports, supporting information, various other things that were needed. The applicant's agent was made aware of that at the start of July with a very comprehensive list of what precisely was needed to be able, well, to enable me to make a proper assessment of the application and reach a recommendation. Unfortunately, that information was not forthcoming. None of it was forthcoming. We got to October, during which time I had agreed an extension of time on the application in the hope that at least some of that information might be submitted. The idea being trying to work pragmatically and reasonably with the applicant rather than just issuing a refusal because of insufficient information. Two documents were received at around about the middle of November. And very shortly after that, the appeal was lodged against non-determination. Now, there will be a number of reasons, I'm sure, sitting behind that, and part of that will, I'm sure, be linked to the enforcement notice which had been served, and the timings of that, which I'm not as au fait with. But the simple fact of the matter is it was the applicant's choice to submit an appeal against non-determination. From an officer's point of view, there was scope to be able to receive the information needed and reach a point where we could have made a recommendation and either brought it to committee or issued a delegated decision. Unfortunately, that decision was taken out of my hands, which is why it ended up with the Planning Inspectorate, and then ensued the following months of back and forth with the Planning Inspectorate, and ultimately the decision which came through fairly recently.
And the applicant's costs claim was not allowed, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's no loss to the council?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yes, interesting that there was no loss to the council, and also the inspector agreed that we did not fail to review the case promptly following the information. So we weren't actually at fault, it was delay of the information coming in. Anyone else want anything on the enforcement? Councillor Phillips.
Just following up on that, does this mean that applicants can play the system? Because that sounds very much like they played the system, that they waited until the last minute, in fact beyond the last minute because you were being reasonable, and then as soon as they put the numbers in, they make a appeal against non-determination. And the reason for the non-determination was they hadn't supplied the information.
I mean, ultimately it happens. It's rare that we get non-determination appeals, and I think, truth be told, it's never really anyone's favoured course of action because it adds a significant amount of time into the process than if you were to just let the application run its course. I think in this instance, there is at least something to be said for the nature of the application, the fact that it's politically sensitive, there's lots of local opposition to that type of proposal. We were dealing with an agent who frequently submits those types of applications, so they are very familiar with how the process works at both planning and appeal stages. So I think it's just, unfortunately, a case where the agent, I'm guessing, did what he thought was best by his client, also bearing in mind the enforcement, the separate enforcement work that was ongoing at the site as well. So taking into account all the timings of things, I'm guessing that's what they thought was the best course of action, despite how long an appeal can potentially take.
But I'm imagining, Mr. Bell, that there is no legal reason to stop that sort of behaviour.
Chairman, I assisted Lucy with this appeal, and it was frustrating that the agent drip-fed documents at the case management conference before the hearing. The inspector had to sort of prompt them to produce some documents. And in the appeals report, it says that because the council made a cost application because we'd had enough, and the inspector said that they only supplied information at appeal when it was requested, not during the application. And the inspector said, in respect of the road safety audit and the flood risk assessment, that wasn't reasonable behaviour, but she wasn't willing to make a cost award against the appellant, which is disappointing. because it was a lot of extra work, a lot of Lucy tearing her hair out and us shouting at the planning inspectorate, but to no avail.
Win some, lose some, and some people can play the game better. Anyone else on there? No. In that case, move on to the urgent item, which is the enforcement report, which I've agreed to take on this meeting.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Hopefully you've all received the urgent report, the enforcement appeals. This was something that we've mentioned previously, that we want to try and bring to members to keep you aware and up to date on what action we are taking, what formal notices that we have served recently. So obviously, as you can see, at the moment we've got 37 live planning enforcement notices. 13 of them have been complied with, and one of them's had a planning permission granted for it, for an alternative scheme. Goes to show how hard my team are working. We've served more notices in our local councils around us. I don't always use that as a sense of success, because obviously the idea of planning enforcement is to negotiate and resolve matters instead of going to formal notices. But it does show that we do take serious breaches very seriously, and we try to react as quickly as possible. I think one thing that we are looking at trying to do is probably provide this report monthly, and also show which wards all those notices are in as well. It's a document in progress, so if any members do have any comments outside of this meeting, please don't hesitate to contact me and give me any suggestions of how you'd like it to view. Once we have our new computer system in the council, it will be a lot easier to be able to pull all this information. At the moment, it's quite archaic. It's down to myself on a spreadsheet. So it will get better, but please keep me updated. And if you do have any questions now or outside of this meeting, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's good that we actually get the information, because we get no end of constituents come and say, well, what's happened on that? You say it's in appeal. And if you actually look at some of the times on these, particularly on the extant ones, it's an awfully long time that you're waiting. Councillor Gifford.
Sorry. Yes, I noticed that there's obviously a number of ones which are going to, where prosecution is being commenced. There's one that actually has prosecution has led to arrest warrants being issued. I was sort of, just a little bit of detail on that would be interesting.
Yeah, this is an ongoing one of a site that we really struggle with. Unfortunately, local people don't understand we can't deal with idiots. We can't stop them from doing stupid things. We just have to carry on taking action. And this is a perfect site for that, where we issued a temporary stop notice to prevent a car sales site in Greenbelt land. He breached the temporary stop notice, so we prosecuted. So we attended court at Coventry magistrates after they failed to turn up for the first hearing. So this time the magistrates, and quite bizarrely, a no bail warrant was issued as well. So when they are arrested, they won't be bailed, which is incredibly rare in planning matters, because in the hierarchy of seriousness, planning is quite low for magistrates. So it was quite a surprise, but also quite nice to see that they are taking it seriously. So we'll just wait for the call from the police as to when they get arrested, and then we'll attend court and go through that process. But obviously, the sad thing is there's no time scale for that. So whilst we still wait for that, the breach obviously is still occurring, which is frustrating from our side.
Thank you. I just wanted to pass on some comments from my residents and parishes to say that they've mentioned there's been a real noticeable improvement and change in action that has been taken. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and your team for your proactive approach. I think you guys can be really proud of the improvement that we've had at Warwick District Council. I think this is an area that is really important to residents. I'm glad that we are taking this action, and I'm really pleased to have this engagement and to have you here. I think it's really good for us to be sort of included in this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was going to say more or less the same thing, actually. I think when Mr. Holloway came in, was it 2 years ago or 3? Gosh, we were really facing a huge backlog of enforcement issues. And it seems to me now that it's well under control. So congratulations on getting that done. And it's very nice to have that sort of feedback from residents.
If it's so under control, we're prepared to publish it. One could say. I'm sure that isn't the case. And a great job's been done by the enforcement team, has really grabbed it. And I think it's crucial that others see what we're doing and that we're prepared to take enforcement action to try and bring people into line. Any other questions? No? In that case, all business for this evening has been considered and I declare the meeting closed.